Well, that puts a cap on the terrible, horrible, very bad season. All right, welcome back to Last Second Sports. We are giving you our take down to the last second, and it is the final post-game rant of the 2024-2025 NFL season, and the 49ers end it losing 7 of 8, finishing 1-5 in the division. Not a great year. This is how it ends. David, my man, how you doing tonight?
Hey man, it's always a good time being on here with you. It's bittersweet knowing that it's the end of the season and the last post-game show for quite a while, but we got a lot to talk to being the last post-game of the show of the season. So I think we're going to have some fun tonight. And I might even raise a few toasts before the night is over, but all things said, hey, number 11 pick, baby. We win it. We came into this weekend of having an opportunity to go from 11 to 14. They do secure the best possible pick. So that's hashtag silver linings.
Yeah, they couldn't get any better than 11, right?
No, because the Saints had already lost. No matter what they did with Tampa, they were going to stay at no worse than 10.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get into some conversation here. Let's start with the Guerrero injury. It's so funny because when things happen early in games, oftentimes you almost forget that they've happened. It feels like forever ago, but Guerrero got hurt very, very early in this game. Now we don't know the extent of it, but what we do know is he was carted off. It's ankle and knee. If it's as bad as it looked, he could be out next season at this point. What are your thoughts on this injury?
I mean, look, I saw some people kind of say, "Oh, this is Kyle's playing too many." Look, every team in the NFL this week had to play some starters here and there, right? And I was all about giving as much reserves run, but Guerrero is a reserve, right? Thing is, Guerrero's been banged up. He was banged up in college. This one wasn't his fault. Obviously, anybody would have gotten hurt there in that situation if it would have happened on his leg. I think that relying on him after something like this going forward, I think relying on him going forward, regardless of this injury, was not something the 49ers were planning on doing, right? They're not going to put all their eggs in Guerrero's basket. But right now, and I've been saying this for weeks, and they couldn't have a better, this is the deepest running back class that I've seen in years. And so they have a hole though. CMC, people can talk about, we don't know. We still don't know. Like Cam Inman talked about, like the alleged minor injury of Brock Purdy. We'll talk about that later too. Is that we don't know what CMC looks like in 2025. We don't, right? We know he came off bilateral tendonitis and he wasn't looking like he had the same burst before, and then he got hurt again. So running back's a huge need for the 49ers. And I'm not saying you go out the first round pick. I'm not saying draft Ashton Genty, right? The idea though is that that's going to be I will not be surprised to see the 49ers draft 2 running backs the same way they did with Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell. I believe that was 2021. I think that was the same year that they drafted Trey Lance. I could be wrong on that. And I just think that it's outside of that. You have Patrick Taylor, who again afforded himself well today. Kyle can polish a turd pretty good at running back, right? But outside of that, who do you have? They had Abanaconda inactive, and I just feel for Guerrero because he's a really good young player. I don't even think Kyle has tapped into what they could use him as. He's a receiver in high school, was recruited as a receiver, and yet you didn't really see him utilize that much with his natural skill set. I'd like to see a little bit more of that as an offensive weapon and not just a guy that you have to line up in the backfield.
Yeah, I mean, this is a heavy running back draft. I mean, you've highlighted a ton of people in our group chat. I'm sure you've done it on Twitter as well. So there's a lot of running backs. And I know that like every year it's like, geez, Kyle, you're going to keep drafting running backs, but they need to now. I mean, to your point, CMC it regardless is going to be 29 years old. This is, I would imagine, even if he plays well, his last year with the 49ers and maybe his last year in the league. I don't know what his plans are, how long he'll play, but 29 years old, coming off multiple injuries, I would expect that he's not going to look like he did last year for sure, even if he's better than he was this year. And then you've got Jordan Mason, who you can't put a second round tender on him. A lot of people were throwing that around. There's no way, way too expensive if you put a second round tender on him. He's likely going to go elsewhere, although you might be able to sneak him in and keep him. We'll see how that goes. Elijah Mitchell, I believe, is a free agent. And then, now Garendo with the injury. Let's hope that it's not like serious long term. But even then, he's not like an every down back where you want to have him get 20 plus touches.
No.
He's gotten injured multiple times this year. So they do need running backs. And I say running backs, plural, at least to get through camp, and we'll figure it out from there. That's even if Garendo is ready to go week 1, which that seems in serious doubt at this point.
Well, let's also think about, we always kind of, I'm not saying you and me, Jesse, but I have in the past, I looked at, and I still think at running back value needs to be pump the brakes. However, there's a renaissance in evolution of thinking around the league about people really starting to say, wait a minute, you're looking at guys like Saquon Barkley out here carrying the team, Jahmyr Gibbs. You're looking at Bijan Robinson, right? Guys were drafted. There's a evaluation of running backs is starting to increase. And I feel like for 49ers fans, we're just so spoiled having CMC, but forget that without CMC, without that caliber of a player, running back, this 49ers offense has been just most league worst in gap running scheme, something that they thrived in years past. And that's no knock on Jordan Mason, but Jordan Mason, running backs can get yards in the 49ers offense. Patrick Taylor just did that today, right? And nobody's confusing him with Walter Payton. Okay, so this idea that I still feel like this should be a priority in the draft, I actually would have no problem as early as the second round. And I know people think that's crazy. If there were a guy that was a difference maker, I probably wouldn't want to do that. But I would say third round, please. I just don't like when people don't consider. Alvin Kamara was a third round running back, right? Yeah. And the Niners passed him up to draft Ahkello Witherspoon. Okay. And everybody wanted Kamara. And I'm sorry, are you saying that if Alvin Kamara would have been drafted at 36, that would have been a bad pick? Hell no. It would be an excellent selection. So yeah, this is something to keep an eye on. We're already we're officially in draft season. So I'm telling you, when you guys are firing up your mocks, don't look at running back as just kind of like, the little sisters of the poor position. It's a deep draft, and the 49ers, I think, should be looking for volume at multiple positions, and I would not be mad at all to see them go volume on taking 2 out of their 8 picks as a running back.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, that's if they don't trade back and pick up a couple extra picks,
right?
Which would be ideal, I think, if we can. So, yeah, I mean, they definitely need some running back depth, and gosh, this thing sucks. I hate seeing it for Garendo. I really do. And again, we don't know that it's long term, but gosh, you get carted off the field, multiple injury places, like it doesn't seem great. I'll say that. I'll say that. All right, let's talk about Juwan Jennings. Early on in this game, also got ejected. I know that you and I were critical of his post game last week, where he talked a lot of trash. In a loss, this seems to be the 49ers MO. Not something I'm a big fan of, that's for sure. But I'll say this, at least for me, you can tell me if you agree or not, but Juwan Jennings is a must-have player. I mean, he's like Draymond Green, him and Dre Greenlaw. One's on the offense, one's on the defense. You need players like Juwan Jennings. Absolutely love Juwan Jennings. But he was 25 yards short of getting 1,000 yards, and it looked like they were trying to force feed him until he actually got there. So he misses out on that milestone, gets ejected, back-to-back plays, fighting, going crazy. Ref gets injured. Like, I don't know, man. I love Juwan Jennings and what he brings, and I don't want him to tone it down all the way. But this one sucks because he was this close to 1,000 yards, and then he just misses it, and he may never get there again, because you look at what he is to this team, and who knows what his career looks like going forward. But chances are, like, this might have been his best chance to ever reach that milestone, and he's going to fall short of that because he wanted to get into some fights with some defensive backs. I don't know, man. I wasn't a big fan of this one.
See, this is the thing. Some of our takes are too nuanced for some people. I think it doesn't matter how much you explain it. I love players who talk ish. I love players who are arrogant. I love players who will, just they talk the talk and they walk the walk. I love it. I love it. I love celebrations. I'll sit here and watch football with my dad, and he's like, "Oh, he's a former referee, a former collegiate referee," and so he's always like, "Oh, these guys just got to act like they've been there before." I'm like, "Why? It's entertainment. These guys should be saying, I've got the next one." I love it. You can love all that and also recognize the elephant in the room that Juwan Jennings is always in the middle of personal fouls. Right? Last week against Detroit, the only reason that wasn't a 15-yard penalty from the 2-yard line and putting them back in a game that they looked like they were trying to win was because the guy, Terrion Arnold, retaliated.
Yeah.
And so look, again, people are like, "Oh, you're soft," or you've never played competitive sports. Like, no, it's like a fine line between inspiring your teammates and letting your teammates down. Are you telling me that if this was a game of import, he's done this in games of import before? Are you telling me that with all your weapons down, George Kittle wasn't playing today, right? Debo is in shades. Now I'm going to get into that on the sideline. He left Dobbs with Ricky Pearsall and Chris Conley as your weapons.
Hey, Trent Taylor played.
Oh, yeah, Trent Taylor did get in. No, sorry. Oh, my God. Yeah. And Eric Saubert played. I saw that. I mean, I'm sorry. And Kyle Juszczyk, I mean, the GOAT fullback, got him a couple touchdowns. I mean, that was nice. Okay. I'm just saying, to put this one to bed, I love Juwan Jennings. You absolutely do have to have him. He is strictly a possession receiver in the NFL, however, and that's okay. Another game where he averaged less than 10 yards a catch today, averaged 7 yards a catch today. Okay. On 10 targets. He already had 10 targets for the middle of the second quarter. I mean, they were force feeding him. And one of Josh Dobbs' only interception, not only he had 2 interceptions. One of those interceptions was, I thought, probably should have been called holding on Sean Murphy Bunting or illegal contact at the worst. But also Jennings doesn't get separation on the outside. He's always in the middle of it. I think that's always who he's going to be. So you take it like that. You mentioned Draymond Green. I'm not a Warriors fan, but I love Draymond's game. And I'm also one of those guys that's always been like, yeah, but it's kind of sucks when Draymond punches people and like gets ejected a bunch of times. But I guess Warriors fans are cool with that. I mean, that's fine. But at some point you have to say, can't you just live to see another day, talk your ish, and just like not get flagged? Whatever. I don't think I celebrate it. My quibble with this was halftime locker room. They go and interview the coaches. Kyle's response was, I don't understand why he got kicked out. The official got hurt in a scuffle, and he just got flagged on the previous play. That's why. It's not hard. They ejected both players. It wasn't because it was his second like, they were frustrated with it. And the officials should have been frustrated with it. And I'm not even a shill for the officials. Like, so, but then what does Jonathan Gannon say? Jonathan Gannon says, you know what? I'm really disappointed. We can't have players that put me before the team. Now, look, I'm not going to take those quotes and say, this is exactly who I think. I just feel like some points there is that culture where players keep doing, Jennings keeps doing this stuff because Kyle is kind of cool with it. I think there's a way to be tough and be a dog and like take big hits and give big blocks and finish them off without getting flagged. And I'm getting a little, I don't
know. The thing with Jennings is that he's always been this way, but he was so good at not getting the penalties in the past. What he would do is he would agitate, and then draw penalties. And it was great. He would like clap in their face. That was awesome. Now he's turning it. It's almost like, and I always like try to compare things to fighting or mixed martial arts, but it's almost like before he was a counter striker knocking people out. And because now he sees he's got dynamite in his hands, he's chasing knockouts and he's going forward, but now he's risking being knocked out himself by doing so. And that's exactly what he's doing, where before he would be the agitator, he'd block you into the ground, he would piss you off, you would get penalties. Now he's getting penalties to draw penalties. And it's like, well, if these guys don't bail you out with their dumb penalties, then you're just getting penalties now because you're trying to chase this agitation thing that you've brought to the league and brought to this team. And he's got to figure out how to get back to what it was before.
one last thing I'll say, even the Lions game, it actually is. He's like, oh, he just blocked the guy out of bounds. Like, yeah, you can't do that. Like, it's the same thing where when you're playing special teams, you can't block a guy out of you can't continue to push these guys out of bounds past the bench. Like, now they didn't even call the flag on that. They called the flag on because he continued to push Terrion Arnold in the face. They threw the flag. Then Terrion Arnold retaliated, and then they threw the other flag. In that game, if it would have been a game of import, are you telling me the 49ers fans would have been elated to go from first and goal to first and goal from the 16?
No, absolutely.
No, that is idiotic behavior. I'm sorry. Like, that is, you have to control yourself in this situation. And like you said, Jennings is usually the instigator. Okay. And I like that. And the verbal instigation is awesome because the officials are never going to call that. They're never going to call. They're not going to hear it. So get in their head, I love that. But once you start to initiate it and get the first flag thrown on you, what's the point?
Meaningless game. I get all of that, but for him, it wasn't, man.
No.
I'm more frustrated that he just missed out on 1,000 yards, but he did it to himself. Like, what else would you expect? So anyways, Sir Cash Money says it's not over till the clock strikes 0, faithful. And then he did later put in that update. We did in fact lose. Matt says different QB, same results, just with less hair. Ty says got to draft a safety badly. Brown sucks. Hufunga is inconsistent and Gibson is too old. Or sign someone in free agency. Yeah, safety is a position of need all of a sudden. Dave says, and some said I was crazy. Worse than I thought. It's 7-10. That is what you predicted at the beginning of the season. Tommy Huxley says, nice fade, Jesse. Quit glazing the NFC West. We just went 1-5 versus the NFC West. I don't know what else to tell you. And that's the division that they're going to have to try to win next year if they want a for sure spot in the playoffs. Smack Jones said they ished on Wilkes for these clowns, 47 points. We're going to talk about Sorensen in a little bit. Double B Studios says just left the game and I watched Kyle's sideline reactions and all I can think is I wish they would fire you.
What was his reaction?
I don't know. I mean, probably a lot of the same things that you see on a regular basis, which is he said it twice. But I would imagine that a lot of it is just watching him look at his tablet and his play sheet. I mean, he doesn't do much else on the sideline, so I don't know.
Or he jokes around with Debo a lot.
He does joke around with Debo an awful lot.
Can we talk about one of those super chats about the divisions?
The
NFC West, because there is this thing like, hey, the NFC West is bad. Well, I mean, okay, 10-7, 10-7, 8, 9, 6, and 11. That's not great, right? But let's look around the league. NFC South, 10-7, 8, 9, 5, and 12, 5 and 12. Okay, NFC North is a juggernaut. Okay, but then let's look at the NFC East. Yeah, you got 14, 3, 12, and 5, but you also have 7-10, 3, and 14. Helps to play the Giants twice. You go up to the AFC South, 10-7, 8, 9, 4 and 13, 3 and 14. You go up to AFC East, 13 and 4. Bills are awesome, but 8, 9, 5 and 12, 4 and 13. Okay, there are worse divisions in the NFC West. And there was just a lot of parity in the NFC West this year. And so all those teams, when the 49ers were like, hey, we should have won, a lot of those teams think that they should have won more games too, right? And again, we look at division 1-5. The Cardinals were 3-3. The Seahawks were 4-2. The Rams were 4-2. So the 49ers had two fewer wins in division than the third place team in the division. That's that's BAD, folks, right? So the reason the division sucks is it's because the 49ers suck.
Yeah, they're definitely not helping it be better. That's for sure. And I would say, I would expect the 49ers are better next year, but I expect that all three of them are better. I'm not saying necessarily better from a record standpoint, that I don't know, but from a roster standpoint, I think all four of these teams could potentially be better next year. I do. It's not just the 49ers. The Cardinals have a ton of cap space. They've been drafting well as of late. I would expect that to continue. They had almost nobody on defense this year. They might go trade for a pass rusher. Like, what if this offseason they're the ones that traded for Myles Garrett, gave up 2 first-round picks? All of a sudden, like, oh, geez, Seattle, they've got some good cap space. This was their first year with this coaching staff. I would imagine they're better. And the Rams are one of the youngest teams in the league. I know Matthew Stafford is older. I know Cooper Kupp is, but they're one of the younger teams. That defense is full of first and second year players. So now they're probably going to invest in some of their wide receiving core, maybe their tight end. Their offensive line is pretty decent. I just think that all these teams have the potential to look better on paper next year. The 49ers just coming back and walking in and winning this division is not a foregone conclusion next year. It's not.
No, and I think that's the thing that we have to consider is that we keep acting like this team is just was an anomalous year. And so let's just say the 49ers weren't 6-11. Let's say they were 12-5. So a couple of those losses might have gone. Maybe they won a couple more in division. You still might have been okay. You're 12-5, and one team was 10-7. One team was 9-8. One other team was 7-10. It's like I don't think that's that bad of a division. And these teams, are you telling me like you look at Arizona, the Rams, and Seahawks, like you think they're going to be worse next year? I don't see how that's a given. I see a team that, the Seahawks are going to get better under Mike McDonald defensively. It'd be very interesting to see what they're doing at quarterback. The Rams, if Stafford is still there, is a team that's getting better and better, are still going to be good. The Cardinals, I felt like made big leaps this year under Gannon, and they just kind of took a dump in the second half of the season, but they had a lot of momentum going. I think they're trying to try to rectify those situations. I'm just not convinced the 49ers are going to be that much better. They have the easiest schedule in the NFL, and I think they should rebound, obviously. They're not going to do worse. But yeah, I wouldn't be projecting the 49ers to be favorites to win the division next year right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. Moises Rosales became a new member. Appreciate you. Double B Studio says, saw multiple fights go down. This team has no discipline. Multiple fights, like on the sideline. I would love to hear more about that one. That's kind of crazy. I didn't hear anything about that. All right, let's talk about Dobbs for a second. And I think this is a great comment to go into it. 187 said Dobbs is crap. And I agree. Dobbs was once a third string quarterback on this team, started today. But stop me when this sounds familiar. Lots of injuries on this team. Not a lot of talent around the QB. Played really well early. In fact, the statistics look pretty decent.
Yep.
Had some deep, wide open guys that were underthrown a little bit.
Yep.
And when the game was on the line, had some bad mistakes and turned the ball over. Stop me when that sounds familiar.
Yep.
And when that sounds familiar from Josh Dobbs, who it's not arguable, this was the worst offensive roster that the team has had all year long. There was no Kittle, there was no Debo, there was no Jennings left the game early.
No, Ayuk
obviously hasn't been there. CMC, Trent Williams. This was the worst offensive roster they've put forward all season long around Joshua Dobbs, the one-time third-string quarterback. And the results and what he brought to the table, although, yes, it looked a little bit different, were exactly the same as the last 3 weeks.
Yep.
Exactly the same. Like I said, underthrown balls to wide open guys, turnovers late when the game was on the line, and looked good early, put up some good statistics. This is exactly what the guy that you're calling trash, we all agree, backup quarterback in this league, he did the exact same thing that Brock Purdy's done for 3 weeks in a row, yet Brock Purdy, people are just all over the moon to go pay a ton of money to. Blows my mind.
Well, Jesse, you mentioned that this is the worst stable of weapons afforded to a quarterback this season. This is the worst stable of weapons a 49ers quarterback has had since Jimmy G was operating in the late season of 2017. It's been 7 years since we've seen. And that was a team that I think, what would they go? They won those last 5 games, right? It was 5-11. Honestly, I mean, I can't even remember who Jimmy was throwing the ball to at the end of 2017 anymore. I think that when we look at this, none of us, you and I, are both not going to have overreactions to Dobbs' performance. Yay or nay. I actually thought he played very well for a backup quarterback.
Thought, yeah, it was okay.
I thought
for a starter, not great. I mean, he's not a starter in this league.
I would say as a starter, I thought he played decently. Right, the first interception. I'm sorry, to Jennings, I felt it was a clear penalty. I also thought that again, it was either that or Jennings just not able to get separation. I thought he was held up. The second one, everybody's talking about the ball placement. There's a middle defender crashing in right there, and he's trying to put him in the spot. I mean, I get it; it's behind him, but it wasn't like Ricky Pearsall was sprinting across the field. He was actually kind of already settled in there. Like it wasn't an impossible. This was not. Nobody would have called that a great catch if Ricky makes that catch. It was a catch he should have made, right? Went right through his hands. Now, was it a great ball? Hell no, right? He's Josh Dobbs, right? He's a backup quarterback. But like you said, if we go back, we will never be able to have the conversation, honestly, about the starting quarterback, right? So I use Brock as a metric for me is you were fourth in MVP voting last year. Okay, so Brock has had more weapons. Last week, what did he have? 3 touchdown passes. 2 of them were behind the line of scrimmage. 1 of them was for 4 yards. Okay. Yeah. And then a touchdown run. What did Josh Dobbs do today? 2 touchdown passes and a touchdown run. And he had the fumble was, to me, inexcusable. He's got to shift that ball to his left hand and not have that stripped. I get it. But again, he's a backup quarterback. He's a journeyman for a reason. So we're not advocating to pay a journeyman. We're not advocating that Josh Dobbs should be brought back. I don't even care if he's a private.
I don't even want him brought back as the backup quarterback.
I don't either. And that's the whole thing that we're tweeting out. My whole point is I had some people like, well, this is passive aggressive attacking Brock Purdy. I said, no, it's aggressive. It's like I'm explicitly saying that this conversation that you guys are saying, like we're saying we don't even want him back as the backup, but we are still able to see that the quality of play that he played today was on par with what Brock Purdy has been doing the last several weeks. And the only time that fans who want a box score can actually direct our attention to when he's played well is against the Bears, who had no coach. Caleb Williams, who's creating more sacks for himself, right, than any quarterback in NFL history. Like, I'm sorry, we do have to have an honest conversation. Now, you and I both don't think that Brock Purdy is hot garbage. But we have to be able to take a starting quarterback who's an MVP consideration, getting paid like an MVP, to really be under the microscope and have a lot of scrutiny. You do have to have more scrutiny. And it's not surprising to me, the stands who are unwilling, who were pouncing on. I have friends that were pouncing on the fumble by Josh Dobbs. They hadn't said boo all day. But boy, when it's Purdy's game, it's live tweeting every single thing. Oh, that was a dot on a dump off. Oh, great touchdown pass on a touch pass. But when no praise for Dobbs all day. And I'm sorry, I actually thought objectively that Dobbs played very well. That Ricky Pearsall touchdown was a great throw. I don't know. I
mean, I don't know who said this 187. Where do you find that at? Because I don't know who in their right mind would say that he's better than Purdy. Like, who would say they want Dobbs over Purdy? That's crazy talk. That being said, though, what was that?
Well, maybe he's saying that there might have been people saying that Dobbs was playing better.
That's a possibility
in the game than Purdy has played in certain games. Sure. I might have seen somebody say that, but again, it was kind of true. Nobody's saying that he's better than Brock. Nobody's saying that they want to like Dobbs as a free agent. No one person I've seen say you got to bring him back in any capacity, let alone a big no, of course not. We're talking about, guys, about a quarterback who is almost ready to command a $60 million APY quarter. And people say, well, it's all about APY. So, okay, don't be pedantic. Like, this is a big decision. And to act like we're just not supposed to have that conversation is insanity. It's an absolute insanity, and it's ultimate bootlicking.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, again, it's just, even if you want to say Brock Purdy, the last few weeks has looked better than what Josh Dobbs looked tonight. Oh, we're splitting hairs. And that's not the way that it should be.
Right.
But Josh Dobbs was literally the third string quarterback.
Yeah.
A big chunk of this season.
He was inactive
tonight against, by the way, that was not the Cardinals B team. They played their starters.
Yep.
And this team had less weapons than it's had all year long. All year long.
Yep.
And it looked similar. That is the point. It shouldn't be that way if you've got a franchise quarterback. And it's not like we're talking about a game. We're talking about a lot of games. And the excuse was, well, he doesn't have this and he doesn't. Dobbs didn't either. And by the way, David, you and I disagree on this, and we did in the chat. So this is no surprise to you. I am not going to sit here and be like, well, I mean, Dobbs, I'm not going to make excuses for the turnovers. I'm not. I wouldn't make excuses for Brock. I'm not going to make excuses for Dobbs, but I don't have to say that they played on the same freaking level. That's the sad part. Like I said, it looked very, very similar.
100%.
Very similar. So let's go through all the things about Brock Purdy as to why I would be hesitant on just giving him bank loads of money. He's got multiple injuries to his throwing arm. He doesn't play well in inclement weather. He doesn't play well in close games in the fourth quarter. And a third string quarterback just came in with less than what he's had all year and looked similar. Any one of those things by themselves would give me pause. But you don't have just one of them. You've got multiple things, multiple reasons to be like, yeah, gee, maybe you should want to see it for one more year. I don't care what the 49ers are going to do. They're going to do what they're going to do. But for the sake of conversation, the point has always been, why not see this through? And the fact that people are so excited to just make Brock this highly paid quarterback when they don't have to blows my mind. It blows my mind. I don't understand it. I really don't understand it.
Can we go back to this? Because again, if you would have said, don't even Josh Dobbs' name. Again, you're right. He was a third string quarterback for this team. People watching on all the platforms. I know you're a lot of you out there. He was inactive for most of the season, folks. Now, if you were to say any NFL team's fan base, strip yourself of Team X. If you were to say that their QB3, who'd been inactive for the vast majority of the season, were to come into Week 18, face starters of another defense on the road, okay, and have WR4, basically, that's what Ricky kind of started off as, right? Like maybe WR3 as your primary weapon. All-Pro Kittle is, I guess, I don't know, wearing Kyle Juszczyk's wife's jackets on the sideline. Like there's nothing there. You got your running back room. Guerrero goes out in the first drive. If you were to tell me that a third string quarterback goes in with that type of situation, and we're still able to have 3 touchdowns and two interceptions at the end of the game, and look pretty good doing it most of the way, you would probably tip your hat to that person. And you also wouldn't have expected it. If we go back to Brock, though, we are not using Josh Dobbs as a standard for which we measure Brock Purdy. We are not using it. Also, I saw somebody this week bring up the Mr. Irrelevant. Mr. Irrelevant is over, folks. Draft status, as Debo Lenore reminded all of us, shouldn't matter. But it does for 49ers fans when you have to suit a narrative. Our quarterback does not need to be insulated from critique. Going to bring up Josh Dubow again. Folks, win down 1 to 8 points in fourth quarter or OT and regular season or playoffs. 41 for 72, 3 TDs, 7 picks. This is 151st out of 160 with 50-plus attempts in that scenario in the 21st century. That means that's pretty much the worst starting quarterback in the 21st century when trailing or tied in the fourth quarter. Guys, like, what are we doing? And so when we went back to go look at it, when you looked at Dobbs' interceptions or turnovers late in the game, right? What happened late in the game against Detroit? By the way, Dubow had already tweeted that out before. This was just a continuation. Brock Purdy went and did on Monday Night Football exactly what Dubow tweeted out about, and he just did it again. He did it in Miami. He did. It's like it just doesn't stop. And so,
David, yeah, you and I both know that if Purdy had played today and it looked like it did with Dobbs, the amount of excuses for how many people were out, but see, you don't get to do that with Dobbs, who's a third string quarterback in this league. Well, backup, but he was a third string quarterback for the 49ers, but he's a backup quarterback in this league. Okay. You don't get to make those same excuses. And by the way, I'm just pointing out that was the reality, just like we've seen with Purdy. So we got a good litmus test here. And if we're going to compare who was dealing with less talented players, it was clearly Dobbs. Like, that's not debatable. So for those that want to make the excuses for 3 weeks in a row now, that's the reason that he's throwing these interceptions when the game was on the line, I can do the same for Dobbs. But those same people won't do the same for Dobbs. You know why? Because it goes against what they want the narrative to be. Just all I'm asking is keep it consistent. If the excuses, that's why I'm not going to make the excuses and be like, well, the interceptions weren't on Dobbs. No, I don't care. Dobbs is responsible for all 3 turnovers.
Sure.
I would have said the same thing for Brock Purdy, so I'm keeping it funky. I'm keeping it fresh. I didn't make excuses for Brock Purdy the last couple of weeks with the injuries. I'm not making them for Dobbs. All I'm saying is, whatever your stance is, keep it the same. Don't all of a sudden, Dobbs is trash. But Brock, when he has the injuries, is like, it's the guy who's injured. What's he supposed to do? You don't get to do that. You have to keep it the same across the line. Be consistent. Be consistent.
It's just again, I like that you're doing that because I would be the same boat as you. I think I was guilty of looking at Josh Dobbs as a third string quarterback. So I was kind of judging him by that standard, right? And then trying to be as objective as possible. But then at the same time, I'm like, you're right. Like, it's still a turnover. Like the ball that went through Ricky Pearsall's hands. Yes, he should have. I still believe he should have caught it. But no, it's not a great throw, right? So the fact that we're trying to have a clarion call to say you cannot compare Dobbs, I just don't understand. And it was pervasive across the TL. Oh, the kings of 49ers spaces were out in droves talking about, oh, come on, man, like you can't believe you're actually gonna cape for Josh Dobbs. Like, nobody's caping for Josh Dobbs. Like they look like there needs to be a study done in 49er fandom of like how much we have insulated quarterbacks where there has been so much evidence in front of you that there should be red flags. And then 4 years later, once it's become socially acceptable to actually talk about what was actually in front of us 4 years before, then it's like everybody's piling on. I'm just telling you, do I think Brock's garbage? No. Do I think Brock should be given top of the market money? Hell no. And if that's the case, I believe the 49ers and Brock deserves to make money. I don't think that the 49ers should. And I'll say it before you do. I think that the 49ers need to be smart. And I don't think it's smart to go with 151st out of 160th quarterbacks performing in tied or trailing games in the fourth quarter.
No. In Rome, for sure. But also, what? I mean, if we're going to cherry pick stats, let's look at the context. 3 of those literally came in one game. So the other 5 games, he has 3 touchdown passes. Like, we do watch the games, right? Like we do actually watch the games. We do remember that 3 of those came in one game. The other 5, really 4, because one of them, he got knocked out early. 3 of them came in the other 4 games. 4 full games, 3 touchdown passes. In what world is that like, oh my gosh?
It's insane. And by the way, 6 touchdowns in how many games? How many playoff games? Don't include the Eagles one.
5.
6 touchdowns in 5 games, folks. We're victory lapping that. Am I in the twilight zone right now? Am I like if I honestly, am I alive right now? Is this happening? Am I dreaming? How on earth? And I get the playoff teams are better, but what? Oh, I can't do this. I can't do it.
I'm just asking for consistency. That's all I'm asking for. So whatever, and I know people's stances, and it's funny that all of a sudden people are like, "Oh, the same people that wanted to pull out every excuse for Brock all just forgot that. Oh my gosh, this team has a ton of injuries and a lot of talented players are out. Doesn't matter this week, right? When we get to pile on the backup quarterback, Brother Bob says Kyle Levy fired Wilkes for Sorensen, so it's all good. We're going to talk about that. I got DX cross chop WWE style by a Cardinals fan. Nice. Well played, Cardinals fans. Dazza says, so Brock Purdy is really $50 million better than Dobbs? Doesn't feel that way. Double B Studio says Dobbs did better than Purdy could have. Maybe. That's a possibility. Chris says, do you regret not trading Ayuk to the Steelers?
I mean, honestly,
hindsight's 2020. You know, hindsight's 2020. I guess my point is with the Ayuk thing is next year is the first year of his official new contract. Let's give it a season or 2 before we just say that Ayuk's buns. But it's not starting out so great. I'll say that.
No.
All day, every day. Kim says Brock's and Josh's pay scale should be about equal. I didn't go that far. Cryptic says starting to see since last season, unless we front ran, we lost and carried that into this season. Not a recipe that can last. Makes it worse when the defense isn't at its best. AZ had a bad 3rd down defense. Yeah. This team is no longer going to be carried by their defense. That is a reality. That is certainly something that we, at the very least, even if this team is fully healthy, this defense is not going to be the reason most of the time that they win games going forward. So if you're going to have an elite quarterback that you give buku bucks to, well, guess what? He better be the reason that they start winning these games. He has to be.
I will say this though, and I want an excuse to talk about my number one draft crush, Renardo Green. Somebody had talked about the clock striking down to 0. Well, I wanted to ask Renardo, if you're sticking with 0, I want to go cop that jersey because you got Dima Lenore signed with the cheapest contract ever for a cornerback of his caliber. You got Renardo Green, who looks like he could quickly become. I mean, honestly, I'm not. This sounds like I'm joking. I honestly think Renardo Green could be a top 10 cornerback in the league by next year. I'm dead serious. I think Renardo Green has actually been just as good, if not better, in coverage than Lenore has all year. People don't want to. And then you add to that, I do think this defense can get back if they really say, hey, that secondary is a strength. And if they can figure out a way to add somebody opposite Bosa and somehow solve the run defense. I get that. It's a lot to ask, but I do think that's closer to being maybe where the team does, because I'm going to tell you this right now. If you pay Brock big time money, you better hope the defense is going to be able to carry you.
Yeah, absolutely. Sir Cash Money says, I'm an injury lawyer who specializes in blimp accidents. Hot air balloons are not qualified. Brother Bob says, Moody did it again. Extend him now. Thanks. Yeah, dude. I've totally forgot that Moody missed another kick. Jeez. Yeah. Rome says, Jesse, the only reason I put up the stat is because the other day you tweeted out the Jimmy and Brock regular season stats. Why? Can you elaborate? I think I think you've said this multiple times, if I'm not mistaken, Rome. And I appreciate the super chat and then just being a part of the chat in general. But I don't think I tweeted that out. I might have retweeted like what Ryan put out or somebody else, but that wasn't like my original tweet. I retweet a lot of things, especially from people that I work with and respect, because I'm just trying to pump up their tweet and help it get out to the algorithm. Half the time, I don't even necessarily agree with what they're saying. So I don't think that I actually tweeted that stat. I do believe that I probably retweeted what I'm pretty sure Ryan tweeted it out. So yeah, I mean, yeah, the numbers were the same, but it wasn't my original tweet. So unless I'm mistaken, if it was my original tweet, then you can show that to me and I'll try to talk through it, I guess. But I don't believe that I was the original person that tweeted that out. Could be mistaken. Let's talk about Ricky Pearsall, because this is something that's very, very positive over the last couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. Ricky Pearsall is starting to come into his own, and I get it. You know, some garbage defenses, games that don't matter. I get all of that, but this has to be, at the very least, a big vote of confidence for Ricky Pearsall. Now, you really liked Ricky Pearsall as a prospect. You didn't push back against drafting him as much as others did, myself included. I never disliked Pearsall as a player. I did say that I believe that he's best suited when he's in motion and playing out of the slot, because at least in this moment, he's not great against press man. I still believe that that was the case. And when you see where he's used most, he's not getting pressed a ton off the line of scrimmage. But I never thought that Ricky Pearsall couldn't be a good player. My biggest pushback against the Ricky pick was the timeline. The fact that he's as old as he is, and after his contract is up, you most likely aren't going to re-sign him. And he wasn't going to be utilized a lot as a rookie, which that became very, very true.
Yep.
And at most, you're going to get 4 years out of this player. Yep. Is the way that I saw it. And that was my biggest pushback. But man, it sure is nice to see Ricky playing well, especially after what he went through this offseason. And he looks like a legit weapon for this team going forward, and is making Deebo Samuel. He's making Deebo Samuel very, very expendable if he wasn't already. I love what I'm seeing from Ricky Pearsall.
I had tweeted out, I thought he's really elevated his play. I think it's also what happens when you actually involve him in the offense. Is what happens when you throw him the ball. I think that, yes, I didn't push back on the draft show as much as you guys, but I also thought he was, I would not have spent that pick on him. I could understand. I had him ranked as WR6 in the draft, which is a lot higher than a lot of other people did. I would say that.
And he was picked, what was he?
31. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
As far as receivers go.
Yeah, I forget. And so, yeah, I'd have to go back and look. I think that You know,
fifth, I think fifth, yeah, which is basically right in the wheelhouse of where you had him. So okay, sorry, I just wanted to see.
No, and to have him though be a 24-year-old receiver, he turned 24 on opening day. Okay, so that's draft. You're drafting that's an old player to be drafted in the first round. That's not somebody that I'm looking at as being slow rolled into the season. Now, of course, he got shot, and that I mean, I don't need to say anything more about that, right? So amazing that he was able to survive it, come back, but thankfully that happened. It didn't seem to. He seemed to be so lucky that he didn't die. Right. But also that it didn't seem to actually injure him in a way that was going to hurt him as a wide receiver. But to be able to come back through that psychologically is impressive. And that to me shows you the type of guy that Ricky is. And I think that going forward, I think what he's done the last couple of games has shown you that he can be a guy that you can count on to be that wide receiver 2-3 type of guy. And he does have the athleticism. What it matters. One of the dings against him was how's he going to do in press man coverage? I think Kyle's getting more creative in how they're going to utilize him. So yeah, going forward, I think it's a great sign because they're going to need him. And we don't know where Ayuk is going to be next year. As far as we know he's going to be in the 49ers, but we don't know where he's going to be out in that injury recovery. I mean, he did that, I think it was on October 20th. And so probably odds are he's not ready for training camp. Right. And again, he missed all of training camp this year. So it's just Debo. I don't even know if I have the energy to unpack all of that. So receiver again, I want to tell you, hate to break it to you, talk about running back being a need. Receivers a need. Right. And if you're putting a quarterback in that needs to have all the weapons, as 49ers fans seem to tell us, even if they don't say it, they said, oh, he doesn't have anybody out. Well, okay. You're going to have to add to that stable. And I think the 49ers will address that again in the draft. And I think I also wouldn't be surprised to see them go look for a vet in free agency because I think Chris Conley is kind of getting up there. Their stable's pretty bare. And I think Debo's best years are clearly behind him.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think it's great. I mean, between Jennings, Pearsall, they're going to have to go get somebody else because you've got, and it doesn't have to be like an amazing player by any means. It shouldn't be a number one, but you do have a lot of your depth guys. Now, Cowing is another interesting one, and that it is unfortunate that he didn't get a lot of run this year because it would be nice to know what he is and what he's not. I'm curious to know what the 49ers think of him. Do they think that he could be the third receiver on this team for a while if they do get rid of Debo? And Ayuk isn't ready to start the season. And then if he comes back, let's say 4 weeks into the season, then all of a sudden Cowing goes to receiver number 4. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And we didn't really get to see him play a lot. But, whether it's Conley, Trent Taylor, Debo, if all these guys are gone, then they're going to need to add a couple bodies into the receiver room, either through the draft, free agency, what have you. So I am curious to see who else they bring in. But Ricky Pearsall is at least making it possible that he can be a starter next year and play pretty dang well, which is great because if that wasn't the case, and a lot of people were worried about that up until these last couple weeks, and understandably so, it would be a concern going into this offseason. We'd be wondering, what is Ricky Pearsall? A lot of people were ready to call him a bust. I certainly was not ready to go there. Way, way, way too early for that. But people should have had questions up until these last couple weeks because we hadn't seen a lot, much like we have questions about Cowing. And it doesn't mean that Cowing can't be good, but we just don't know because we haven't seen a lot. So it is nice to see that Ricky Pearsall got enough burn to know, okay, we feel comfortable with this guy on the field. 3 receiver sets, maybe is the second wide receiver, what have you. And if Ayuk is healthy, potentially the slot receiver, I love that. That's absolutely great. So
I agree.
And Rome is confirming off the super chat that I reposted Ryan's tweet, which is what I thought I did. So I'm not going to defend a take that wasn't mine, respectfully. Brother Bob says kicker and punter are needs. So first and second round. Jeez, I hate you. All day, every day. Kim says, will San Francisco draft a quarterback in the first half of the draft? Maybe. I don't know. Yes. I think they should. I think they should draft somebody at some point in this draft. I think you should always draft quarterbacks and just see what you can get. Maybe sometimes, maybe you hit the lottery on somebody and then you can trade them or trade Brock or whoever your starter is. Just it's the same thing with the Vikings right now. They drafted a quarterback. Who knows if they've hit on that quarterback, but he hasn't played, and now he's a hot commodity. If they want, they can certainly trade him, keep Sam Darnold, or they can trade Sam Darnold, get some assets, and go with JJ McCarthy. But they're in a good spot because of it. The Falcons were in a good spot because they paid Kirk Cousins. They drafted this young quarterback who looks pretty decent, by the way. Kirk Cousins hasn't panned out, but they've got the young quarterback. If they pay Brock and Brock gets injured, but they've got a young quarterback and he comes in and plays well, then you've either got the replacement to Brock or you've got a guy that you can trade for assets later on. So I think you should always be drafting quarterbacks and keeping the quarterback room young, and maybe you hit on somebody. So
yeah, I think they absolutely have to. We know that Brandon Allen and Josh Dobbs are both free agents, by the way. I believe so. I don't think I'm wrong on that. So they don't have anybody under contract except for Brock. And again, Brock Purdy's actually under contract. I think a lot of fans forget that for next year. Exactly. So they don't decide. They actually don't have to give Brock Purdy money. There is no rule that says that you have to do this. And given the concerns around his elbow, you talked about this before. I know we're going to talk about Brock again, but quarterback is going to be a need in the draft. As far as like if you're looking at the backup, I'm not saying I'm not going to get into the whole idea of that rookie's going to start for your team or anything like that. But what veterans do you have that are going to be able to come in outside and be a backup? I mean, we talked about Zach Wilson. We talked about, a couple of the guys, I'm sure, but like, I don't know what that looks like. And so Bill Walsh was always a fan of drafting a quarterback as frequently as you can, because they're the most valuable position in the game. And the 49ers have learned the good way, drafting a quarterback at 262. Look how that panned out. Pretty darn good, right? Like it bailed them out. Yeah. So this idea that you don't thumb your nose at drafting a quarterback anywhere in the draft. And I honestly, I'm not going to be surprised by anything. I think we're going to learn a lot in the next several months about where this extension goes. But with his injury, as Cam Inman said, allegedly minor, I must say we need to have more fans that have the believe it when I see it mentality with these things, because 49ers have always been evasive when being upfront about injuries. And it's there's just going to be a lot of uncertainty over the next several weeks. And so, yeah, if I'm firing up my mock drafts, folks, yeah, by all means, start looking at quarterbacks.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you remember the Brock situation, I mean, he was basically drafted, but he was supposed to be a camp arm. Remember they had I think it was Sudfeld was their third string quarterback. He was their backup. They actually gave guaranteed money to him.
Yeah.
Then they had the whole crazy situation with Jimmy Garoppolo. They lost guaranteed money that they had given to Sudfeld because they ended up trading him. But that's because Brock played so well. He earned the third quarterback spot on this team. If you draft somebody in this draft later, especially, you got Mordecai, you bring him in, you can even bring in a veteran and let him figure it out behind Brock. Like whoever that quarterback is, but if somebody comes in, plays really well and earns a spot, who's to say that they're not a good quarterback in the future? So, and there's guys in this draft. I haven't done deep dives on the quarterbacks, but I do know there are guys that are going to go round 3, round 4-ish that are certainly very interesting prospects. Very interesting. That's not saying that they're going to be great, but man, you just don't know. So it is worth taking a flyer if you believe that one of those guys is worth it. And that's what the 49ers are going to have to figure out. They're going to have to do their due diligence in studying these guys and going through the film work. But I don't think you should ever stop taking quarterbacks.
Well, ask yourself this, 49ers fans, and I think we all have selective memory about how well this team drafts. We definitely, the 49ers in the Shannon Lynch tenure have been abysmal in the first round. They haven't actually been very good in the first 3 rounds. And so the idea that I think over the last 21 drafts for picks in the first 3 rounds, there's been very few big time hits or even hits that become regular contributors. In the draft where Purdy was drafted, he's the only regular contributor on the entire team. and they drafted 9, 10 guys, right? So they have hit on 5th rounders. They have done that, but also you draft Jake Moody in the 3rd round. You draft Jair Brown, who's on the outs now. You draft Cam Latu, who's not on the team in the 3rd round. Why not with 2 3rd-round picks?
TDP, Sermon. Oh.
Seriously, though. So if you're in the 3rd round, you have 75 and 101 this year in the draft. Why would 75 be a bad spot to like draft a little higher than you might think about a guy that you like? And if he doesn't end up, by the way, drafted 75th in the NFL, if that becomes a reliable backup, that is incredible value. Yep. Incredible value. And so I am, and by the way, we know, Jesse, the 49ers are scouting quarterbacks actively. Like they are doing their due diligence and then some on anybody that's going to be available at quarterback. So I would be shocked if they don't spend a pick on a quarterback this year. But again, the 49ers shocked me a lot.
I mean, I would rather them do that than bring in a Kirk Cousins or something. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
To me, because to your point, like, what if this guy is good enough? Even if he's just the long-term backup, that's completely worth it at that pick. Completely worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, put it this way: if they bring in Kirk Cousins, I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to put this to bed right now. If you bring in Kirk Cousins, which don't tell me that Kyle is just going to say, yes, you're the veteran backup. You're just holding the clipboard. I won't believe that for a second.
Yeah. Daza says, do we need that many more wide receivers? Josh Allen's getting it done with Amari, Coleman, Shakir, and I thought Brock was elite. Hey, listen, I'm for sure. Preaching to the choir here. Josh Allen is actually elite. Eric Dane says, Dave, that Christmas tree is looking more decrepit than Ebenezer Scrooge. You got to water that thing, bro.
No. Let me tell you.
I think there's a tree outside is what is going on. And
I got a tree right here. Now we cut ours down in the Superior National Forest. We get a $5 permit. You just kind of get what you get. They're a little Charlie Brown, but they're natural trees. They're not farmed. I'll tell you, this tree, it's funny that you brought that up, has been supporting the weight of the goat right here. Look at this. Joe Montana right there, still hanging up. Now, my kids,
I like that.
We were joking a little bit about how long we were going to leave the tree up this year. My kids love Christmas. We'll probably take it down like next weekend or so. But, just for you, Eric, I'm going to keep this up for another month. And I'm going to give it some extra water. And Ebenezer Scrooge, by the way, you might be watching the wrong movies. Okay. Go watch it with George C. Scott, who played George Patton, one of the best actors of our time. You tell me by the end of that movie that guy couldn't take out a fullback like Kyle. If Kyle Juszczyk was on leak and that guy was a safety and Ebenezer Scrooge was a safety, he would have sent Kyle Juszczyk into the 5th dimension. Okay, so just take it easy on my tree, man.
Yeah,
really brings the room together.
I mean, I don't know that Herbert's going to be a Hall of Famer. We'll see how his career goes, but a big chunk of this fan base thought that Purdy was better than Herbert, and still do, oddly enough. What all-pro talent is around Justin Herbert this year?
This isn't a super chat. This is just a comment.
This is just this is Rome. Rome's been contributing. I'm not trying to, you know what I mean? And this whole thing, he hasn't won anything. Okay, but that doesn't separate you from being a Hall of Famer. I mean, Josh Allen, I just want to throw this out real quick. I think there's for sure two quarterbacks in NFL history, maybe 3 that are elite level quarterbacks that when they go from the regular season to the playoffs, that all of their numbers improve. Completion percentage, touchdown to turnover ratio, yards per game. Josh Allen, Joe Montana, and I think there might be one other one that I'm forgetting. But look at all the other elite quarterbacks, all the other Hall of Famers. Mm-hmm. They don't do it. They don't do it across the board. Josh Allen is doing something that most Hall of Fame quarterbacks do not do. So to say that he hasn't won anything and to act as if that's on Josh Allen is absolutely crazy because he literally gets better across the board when he goes into the playoffs.
Yep.
That is a fact. And he's one of the few players to do so. One of the few.
I mean, John Elway won 2 Super Bowls at the very end of his career. Those years his last year, he threw for 22 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. The year before that, 27-11, right? The reason I'm bringing that up is, yeah, I mean, I get it. Hall of Famers have people around them, but do you need, like, before that in his career? What did John Elway for most of his career, where he was making Pro Bowls, and he didn't have a all-star cast, right? Like, this idea of we're not talking about like support cast. We're talking about peak CMC, a healthy peak Brandon Ayuk, peak Debo, peak Kittle, Trent Williams. What, like, do you realize, like, there's arguments being made there that that's the best supporting cast that any quarterback's ever had? Like, there's arguments for it, right? It's like, that's not sustainable. And so, yes, I mean, can you imagine Josh Allen with that? You look, guys, the 49ers would have gone undefeated with Josh Allen at quarterback last year. 20-0. 100%, right? That's the Avengers. So again, that's a complete hypothetical, but like, why are we talking about Josh Allen? Like, Jesse shouldn't even have to like bring those stats up. Go do your own research. Like, go look it up, right? Like, you're talking about Josh Allen.
This whole quarterback's win thing is so like bogus to me. I'll give an example. Tom Brady lost a Super Bowl throwing for over 500 yards. I think 3 touchdowns and 0 turnovers. Lost a Super Bowl. He also won a Super Bowl throwing for 149 yards, 1 touchdown, and 0 turnovers. So which version do you think was better? The guy that threw for 500 yards and multiple touchdowns, or the guy who was early in his career threw for 149 yards and a touchdown? Both games had 0 turnovers. The game that he produced way more, he lost, and the game that he didn't contribute much until the final drive, which is super important, by the way. I agree. But clearly, this version of Tom Brady was much better, the one that played Philadelphia versus the one that played the Rams early on in his career. Yet he lost when he played Philadelphia with those numbers and being clearly the better player than when he won. So this whole thought that, a quarterback wins and so they're great, then let's just go back to Jimmy Garoppolo, who is debatably, for a guy who has multiple playoff games, one of the worst quarterbacks in playoff history, yet he's 4-2 in his playoff career, making an NFC championship and making a Super Bowl. So is he on level with Brock Purdy? Is he better than Dan Marino? Is Nick Foles better than Dan Marino? You see how asinine this gets when you keep going. So we got to stop that when a team wins and loses, that it's solely the quarterback that deserves the credit or deserves the blame. That's just not the way that it works.
Well, let's look at Jimmy Garoppolo. Funny that you should bring that up. Almost identical numbers to John Elway when John Elway was in 97 and 98. In the 27-13 and 20-12. The other was, honestly, they're almost completely identical, right? Nobody would argue that Jimmy Garoppolo is a better quarterback than John Elway. We understand that. Okay. I just feel like we box score scout too much. You guys got to start watching the games. And again, if you were to ask every GM in the NFL, who would you go with, Josh Allen or Brock Purdy? They wouldn't even answer because they were laughing too hard. And then they'd stop breathing and would die because of their laughter. Right? It would go on. The quickest way to kill 32 GMs is ask them that question. Okay. And then this is just asinine.
Dazza says over or under the Niners actually upgrade the offensive line. Man, they've got. I'm not even going to go down a pretend scenario in which they don't. I will say this: I had Roscoe's on the show, and he made a good point in saying that the 49ers will finally upgrade the offensive line because it's, for the first time, the bad offensive line has impacted the run game, and they haven't been great in their run blocking grades. Maybe that will be enough for Kyle Shanahan to finally get over. Eric says, so does this mean we have Tiny Tim at quarterback? Yeah, I'm not going that far. I'm not trying to insult him. I'm just trying to be realistic about what he is and what he's not. Dazza says Brock's best year coincided with having the off Offensive player of the year, and only the sixth time in NFL history a team has had 4 players with over 1,000 yards from scrimmage.
Yeah.
Listen, for sure. But Brock did contribute to that.
Sure.
The whole thing is like both can be true. Brock definitely did things with this team that not all quarterbacks can do. We can all agree with that.
Yep.
But there is also another level that a true elite quarterbacks could have brought this team to that Brock could not. Both those things can be true. So that's the way that I see it. David, I had one more topic, but I do got to run. I'm going out of town tomorrow. I got to put my kids to bed. I know that school's starting back for you tomorrow as well. So everybody enjoy the Sunday night football game. Should be a really good one. And we're going to talk plenty. I'll be in LA this week. So hopefully you hear from me. We'll see how it goes. Much love, y'all. Appreciate you. Peace.